Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Litfia Ahmed, and joining me is Sjeanne, who's going to share her journey with us. Welcome, Sjeanne. And can I ask you to do a quick introduction, both personally and professionally? Introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks so much, Lou, and lovely to be here. And thanks very much to Journeys to Inspire for the amazing platform and opportunity. So just personally, I'm a person who, in my own personal capacity, I really like to be in new situations. I'm a person who embraces change, who explores change. And quite specifically, I do this in order to really discover more about myself, more of who I am, more of what I'm capable of. And I'm a person who likes to master myself. So I like to master myself in uncomfortable places. I do this in order to, as I say, evolve myself, discover more about myself, and really liberate myself out of, I guess, my own limitations, my own conditioned patterns and thought processes, to really extend my own knowledge base, my own understanding of myself, of the world, and what I'm capable of. And so in light of this, I'm a person who explores different areas. So areas, for example, like quantum physics, quantum mechanics. I'm deeply invested in evolving my own sort of consciousness around this space. I enjoy conversations around energy, frequency, and how so that plays out in the world. And I do uncommon things. So, for example, I'm a person who has run 4 Comrades. Comrades is a 90-kilometer run in South Africa. So it's ultra marathons. I have switched careers 3 or 4 times. I have a very active meditation and contemplation practice that can last up to go for sometimes 2 hours a day. And I really feel these are the spaces in which I discover more of myself. In my sort of professional capacity, again, this is all about mastery. So I would describe myself as a futurist. I have a very sort of forward-thinking, future orientation, visionary. I have a knack of being able to tune into future trends and then bringing this kind of new ideas, new thinking into business places, into organizations. And this is really evident in the likes of, like, I have a passion for Web3, for blockchain. It's these non-traditional spaces that I feel are really coming in to influence these big trends, AI, and how is that influencing organizations? How is that influencing and shaping really the world in which we're living in? How is that changing the game, changing things up? And then how do we need to adapt and master our environments? And so in that context, I guess I would describe myself as a bit of a corporate shaman. I have a deep experience in business transformation, strategy, change, bringing in, as I say, these kind of more future-orientated aspects. I recently have moved to the United States from South Africa with my wife, Dana. She's an American, so we find ourselves now in the United States. And in that context, having come from the financial world where I was working with the Rand Merchant Bank in the First Rand Group until recently, Dana and myself have recently started new businesses, Arena of Life being one of them, and Center of Liberation, where Arena of Life really focuses on, it's a technology, a piece of software application that's on the app stores now, and looks to really help support businesses, organizations, small teams, as well as individuals, really get their strategies, their visions activated. Performance can be used as a performance management tool, and bring together cohesiveness around realizing strategies. And then Center of Liberation is really the consulting leg of that to support the software, and really looks to how we will consult into businesses, liberating and activating kind of the sort of human ingenuity, the creativity, the meta innovation within organizations to drive business transformation, organizational transformation, cultural transformations. So exciting path. In terms of where I find myself personally, in a bit of a rebuild, a rebrand, a new country, new space. Like I said, personally, I like to be in new spaces, and that's exactly where I find myself currently. So with that being said, that's a bit of an intro into who I am.
That's lovely. Thank you. And I think when we chatted before, you also mentioned you have a very 4D personality and you love embracing just being yourself. And I think that's such a lovely outlook. I think even this morning we were having a chat around how so many people want to be similar to other people, but we just need to
Mm.
embrace ourselves. And I think you have so much to contribute with that, so much to contribute. What sort of inspired you to be part of Journeys to Inspire?
Yeah, I think when the opportunity came up, I mean, I was really just drawn uh, to want to share my own personal journey. And I'm sure we'll chat about it, going forward. I think one of the things that for me personally, I've kind of faced is being gay in a very, from a very young age, and having to walk that journey both personally and then professionally. And that was some sort of 30 years ago. And so within that context, I just reference that because it's really about truth speaking. It's around showing up authentically. It's around really having the courage to bring the fullness of who I am into fruition. And that might look different to other people in that sort of diverse background. So when Journeys to Inspire came around, I was really sort of excited to be able to both share my journey and look to hopefully inspire and encourage other people who don't necessarily fit into the status quo, who don't necessarily fit into the norms. I think I was always, on the playground at school, I would always find myself thinking, wow, I just feel different. I just don't feel like I quite fit in. Like I just feel different, and I could never really understand that. And then, as I sort of grew up, I was really always highly capable, highly able individual. And so with Journeys to Inspire, but I guess, just to go back to that, but kind of found myself losing my way a little bit. Now, I think it takes a great deal of courage in order to really stand in your own authentic power, to really sort of embrace the bigness of who you are, your own powerful self. And I think there's many women, um, across all age categories that really sort of that ability to find your voice, express your voice, and really embrace the fullness, the power, the bigness, the giant within yourself, and bring that forward into the workplace, into what you're doing, and and not sort of hide behind or become invisible or become small, but come to the forefront of who you are, and lead and self-lead, and encourage others to really lead themselves as well. And so I hope to empower, inspire. What are the things that I've done? What are the things that I've faced in my own personal journey? And how do I kind of leave footprints? I would hope for others to advance themselves in their own careers, and really coming to the fullness and the full expression, and mastering themselves and discovering. I have a concept where I say, meet the new you, and how do you be different and yet contribute significantly to workplaces.
I think maybe if we can jump straight into it,
Mm,
then you're obviously a success story. Are there any specific challenges you faced? Can you maybe chat us through them and how you've sort of overcome them, and just how to manage expectations of others?
mm. Yeah, Lou, I mean, I think, when even in Journeys to Inspire, we're all highly capable women who have come together. We're all success stories, and we all have our challenges. And I think every conversation I'm in, not just with this group of people, but even, when in the workplace and through my career, I've had very, very inspiring conversations. Everybody faces challenges. Everyone seems to have a story around having to overcome certain limitations, or certain backdrops, in terms of, whether obviously we come from a country of apartheid, and difficulties. So I think everybody has their difficulties that they have to overcome. For me specifically, like I mentioned, 30 years ago, I realized, well, probably longer, as a young kid, 15, 16, I'm 51 now. I realized that I was gay. Now, if you think back to 30, 32 years ago, that was a pretty scary place for a young girl, in fact, where I found myself. and I referenced earlier, so just being highly capable. I was a very highly capable sports person. So I played squash professionally from a very young age. I was sort of nationally ranked #1 in the country. I was excellent at hockey. I was always competing against the boys, for example, in squash. And I was just highly capable. So at 12, 13, I was sort of playing above my league. Even in squash, I was playing women's league at the age of 13, 14. I was competing against guys. I was very strong physically. And that just wasn't the norm. And then, as I said, on top of that, so on the playground, I kind of, people didn't know really where to fit me or how to fit me into things, and then sort of through that process, realizing that I was gay and now this was more different, and so that kind of separated me out from my sort of peers at that age, and yeah, I think making the choice at a very young age to actually come out, first of all, obviously to my family and friends, I knew that was always going to. Yeah, again, just sort of, it was a difficult time, being gay 30 years ago was not accepted, just sort of within society, and there were laws against it. In fact, you could be sort of, was like a criminal offense. So it was a very, very brave and courageous decision to stand in my truth and, share with my parents where I was at. And then just have to really face, what did that mean for me, and what was it like for me to then be in the world, further with this diversity, segregation, and having to navigate those worlds. And it was difficult. Lou, it was a difficult process, and I faced a lot of rejection. I faced a lot of, it was difficult for my family to accept. It was difficult for friends to accept. And I had various instances where, in fact, even at varsity, sort of friends who were initially going to want to live with me in digs, like no longer wanted to live with me in digs in case others thought, that they were gay. And so those were just some of the things. I remember being at a party once, and once people found out that I was gay, they asked me to leave the party. So, I found that really, really difficult. And that was, 2021. I'm not sure I really had the skills to deal with all of that. And then coming into the workplace, what was interesting is, sort of having to, and obviously South Africa progressed quite significantly. So let's just position that, and we have a very forward, our democracy and constitution is very inclusive, but it still took society some time to catch up. And so being gay, being a woman in the corporate space, and in addition, I'd say being a forward thinker and a bit of an innovator and a bit of a visionary, that combination of bringing in the diverse thinking, of bringing in difference, remained a challenge for me, through my process. And so as I think about, these things, what I'd say to people is, ultimately, you're always going to have to overcome something. You're always going to have to face yourself, not because it's a form of punishment. It's just because those are the spaces in which you are invited to expand into, invited into really sort of own who you are, and be in the truth of who you are. And I think the corporate space, I think the workspace specifically, provides various opportunities for mastery, for discovering and continuing to move into spaces to evolve your own capacity, your own resources, your own ability to be more than what you are. So I'd say, in terms of like what you're going to kind of come across in the workspaces, you are going to come across your limitations. You're going to come across, where your own sort of shadow sort of elements will play out. And when you do come across those things, expect sort of your environment to push back at you. Expect some difficulty, expect some challenges, not because you're being punished, not because anyone's trying to actually harm you. You've almost got to depersonalize it and rather see it as almost like this contract with life, to expand into what you're really capable of, and to expand into coming into your own sense of authority and your own sense of wisdom, through your journey. And so, just embrace it. Embrace I kind of look at, my corporate life experience and my life experience of having to overcome some of the challenges, having to overcome some of the, the segregation sort of pieces of my life, and this kind of separateness um, and the diversity issues. But I see them more as again, just mastery of self, and life almost echoing back to me, being in this game of life, and being in this game of the corporate space. Say, oh, this is like a school of life, really, and we all are actually diverse. And what is life mirroring back to me in terms of embracing the bigness, and embracing my own sense of authority and authenticity. So for people moving through these spaces, it's really around saying, don't be afraid of the challenges. Don't be afraid of what is mirrored back to you in the corporate space. Rather, see these as showing you personally where your limitations are, and personally where the opportunity is to extend into beyond your own status quo, and to discover more of yourself and master yourself.
Yes, definitely. I think embracing challenge helps you with the greatest growth. You're
Oh.
definitely corporate shaman. um, and then if I flip it, going away from the challenges, maybe have you seen any positive change in the narrative? So a lot of the time, do we like to speak of challenges and how we're overcoming it? But is there anything positive that you've sort of noted in the narrative, especially from a woman empowerment perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have to just look at First Rand Group and Rand Merchant Bank, and again, former employee, and I have to sort of just really congratulate the leadership for what they're doing, and how they go about it. So they've got a very, very active diversity and inclusive program, various women empowerment programs. And whilst I still find that there can be some elements, for example, of, personal dynamics that play out, at the corporate and executive tables. And these things play out in the form of, let's say, individualism, territorialism, wanting to build kind of empires, and there can be some undermining. But those are a lot of the personal dynamics that can play out between men and women. But when I look at First Rand Group and R&B, like, I see how proactive they are in terms of truly looking to empower women. And that is really evident in, we have Emery Brown as the first female CEO of Rand Merchant Bank, and that was came into fruition last year. And now more recently in South Africa, you would have seen Mary Vilakazi is looking to step in to replace Alan Pullinger. So it's not just the narrative that's changing, but it's the practicalities that are changing. And what is so great about this is that, my own take on it, like, obviously the succession plans have been very successful, but there's a commitment. So Alan, for example, has been CEO for 5 years, and there was a very deliberate and active plan put into place. And he's been, even when he was at R&B, it was about a 5-year tenure, and then he stepped away. Again, it's a 5-year tenure, and he will step away, in his 6th year. But he doesn't hold on. So I think just from a an observational perspective, he truly does walk the talk. In other words, he doesn't hold on and go sort of beyond 10, 12 years, but he's really enacting, and the group is enacting, and the leadership team is really enacting that. I can also see just around the tables, we have we had a very diverse and inclusive leadership forums. We had various programs that really spoke around sort of whether very active sort of gay community as well, and just stories that were shared on an ongoing basis through various forums and channels. And so I definitely see, and obviously I was with the Rand Merchant Bank for 10 years, so I can't talk to other organizations, etc. But I could see across sort of the nation of South Africa how various diversity and inclusion models were being adopted. And so definitely the narrative is and continues to change. I think where people can still struggle, and for me, where I kind of observed the nuances, was people didn't really know how to have conversations with me. That changed over time. But initially it was like, where do we fit you and how do we, like, I don't know. And a few times it was even said to me, we just don't know how to fit you into a role. We don't know, where do we fit you? You're like, so you bring so much to the table. You've got so many different interests. You've got, so many different inputs. And even with the futuristic thinking and bringing in new ideas, it was like, how do we fit that into the organization? So I think where there's still room to move in terms of organization, and there's been a lot of progress, is I think we're going to see more and more, especially with these sort of non-traditional things like Web3, for example. I referenced that, like AI, Web3, metaverse. These are very non-traditional initiatives being driven in non-traditional ways. In other words, things like this whole Web3 space, yes, part of it is data and that kind of stuff, but there's a big social movement. There's a big social innovative movement that people want something different. They want something else. And it's not necessarily being driven by your traditional data metrics, right? There's these philosophical discussions. There's these shifts in consciousness that we're seeing. There's obviously the AI. There's this meta creativity, this meta innovation that's coming through. People want something different. And so in an organization, and I'll loop back to where I see, yes, there is change, but yes, there's still space to grow, is that whilst we see these new innovations coming in, I personally would grapple with bringing in new thinking, bringing in non-traditional thinking based on, as I say, not always data-driven metrics, but there was the intuitive sense, there was the social movement, the philosophical discussions, and then having to influence and having to get buy-in to very traditional structures. And we'll see quite typically, for example, we have innovation spaces, we have these innovation capabilities, we have, just not just where I was working, but in other organizations being brought into inception that would run alongside your sort of traditional capabilities and business models. However, I also found it interesting that within these spaces, that the innovation capabilities would oftentimes would be the way there would be sort of cuts in budget, there would be cuts in sort of resourcing. When times got tough, people would divert back to the traditional thinking, to the traditional way we've done things, to the same as. And so whilst there's progress there, I also sense and feel like there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of embracing the diversity in thinking, who's bringing it forward, the nature of the person that's bringing it forward, in order to really sort of start adopting, you have to kind of marry your traditional and your non-traditional worlds. I personally describe myself as, for example, one person, as a person with, like, I'm 1 foot in traditional and I'm 1 foot in non-traditional. I'm 1 foot in traditional finance. I'm 1 foot in non-traditional finance, so I kind of invest across my investment portfolio now into different investments. I'm one person in 3D, three-dimensional, and I'm one person in 5D, 5-dimensional. What does that mean? It means I'm one person who looks at these quantum physics, quantum mechanics, consciousness, energy, frequency, yet I live in this 3D human experience. So how do we start blending these worlds, and how do these traditional industries, traditional organizations start blending more in order to embrace the diversity that is existing in the non-traditional spaces? So it's not just diversity that exists within individuals, for example. It's the diversity that is now existing in these very non-traditional spaces, and then marrying that into this human ingenuity. And so, so those are just some of the thoughts on, yes, how I see the narrative changing and continues to change. And then, yes, where there's opportunity to still expand into and think differently operate from a different level of mind and consciousness based on the evolution of where we're seeing, like, for example, consciousness evolve to, that is being brought on by, like I say, the inception of these non-traditional ways of doing things where people are wanting something different and being able to tune into, well, what does that actually mean on the ground to us?
Well, I think you raised such a valid but like mind-boggling argument for
Mm,
for the need for change. So I get your point of like learn from the traditional ways, but only when you break the norms do you truly innovate and find something worthwhile. And I think you also mentioning that you didn't quite fit a specific box. We always speak about working in silos and then people leaving and then going back to
mm,
our silos. And sometimes multidisciplinary is us becoming multidisciplinary and not fitting just one box.
mm,
So I think that's a lovely observation. Thank you for that.
yeah.
Um, so I think in terms of maybe a legacy you'd like to leave behind, what would you think that would be?
That's such a great question. A legacy I'd like to leave behind. So I
Some
think it,
words of inspiration for the younger generation.
yeah. So I think it comes down to, and I started out by saying, or by referencing, like, who are you? Who's the giant within you? And I feel like, it probably speaks to my journey. What are the things that, and who are the people that I like to work with, and organizations and people that I like to coach. And it's the people who I guess in organizations who are ready to up level, who are almost frustrated within themselves because they know that they're either in their organization, there's a bigger, better version of their organization to come through. So they're lying awake thinking about, well, I'm frustrated because I just know there's more in my people. I know there's more. I can see there's more in my people. Or personally, people are lying awake and thinking to myself, I'm frustrated with myself because I know there's more. I know there's more of myself to bring out into the world. I know that there's a more powerful version of myself that is here to be brought into the world, and there's a bigger version of myself that's here to be brought into the world. And I'm frustrated internally with myself. And so when I look at a legacy and what it is that I would like to sort of leave behind, it's really around how do we bring and bring women and men across various sort of sectors, across various age groups, into the forefront. In other words, not shying away from their own greatness, but rather how do you claim and proclaim your own greatness and bring that into the world in a more deliberate way, and become more visible. And I say this because I think in my journey, I personally made myself invisible. I personally kind of wiped, almost like erased myself and my value and the highly capable individual that I was. I wiped that out based on the response that I received in terms of, who I was and the truth that I was speaking. And so when I think about a legacy I'd like to leave, it's around sort of really empowering, inspiring, equipping individuals with the various tools, the capabilities to really illuminate that power within. And I'm talking power within in terms of their own spirituality, their own connection to truth, their own connection into the source, the God, the divinity within themselves, and to bring that into the world in a more deliberate way. And part of that is really doing that as a collective as well. There's great power in the collective coming to do that and permissioning it. And when I think around sort of organizations and what I would like to leave behind is seeing organizations, seeing the collective, seeing communities really advance the levels of consciousness, advance humanity into new levels of consciousness, where new levels of human ingenuity have come to fruition, where new ways of thinking have come to fruition, and new ways of being have come into fruition as a result of the work that I personally have done, or my own sort of contributions to humanity, and seeing humanity advance leaders advance in terms of the solutions that they're offering. We're living in such trying times at the moment where obviously we're looking at sort of, on the cusp of potentially World War III. We're seeing sort of real difficult times in terms of, economically, politically, inflation. There's just so many different problems to be solved. And we have to come at this from a greater level of mind. We have to come at this from something different. We have to come at this from levels of cooperation and collaboration and extracting wisdom from the past and the way we've done things, but adding in new wisdom. And so equipping people, individuals, women, youth, young leaders to really come into the forefront and powerfully come into the forefront and powerfully have a voice. And even when there's pushback is to really powerfully drive a different narrative and a different agenda. And then I kind of have this concept of lead, inspire, influence. And it takes an incredible amount of courage. And it's something that I'm fortunate in terms of I've always had a lot of courage in my life, but I've also had that squashed personally. And to have that courage to continue to drive change, to continue to drive diversity, to continue to drive inclusivity, and to continue to celebrate powerful beingness, powerful becoming, powerful invigorating solutions, and celebrate as opposed to cut down, as opposed to undermine old ways of thinking, and come into more of a collective, like I say, a more cooperative, more collaborative, and more energized space. I think importantly, I think there's still a lot of work to do in the context of people overcoming their own sort of, I call them shadow energy, shadow frequencies. In other words, what are those things where I can find myself undermining myself or others? Is that through control? Is it through manipulation? And how do I rise above that to come into a more of an expansive view? And so truly participating in driving levels of consciousness, in advancing humanity to greater and greater levels of, as I say, collectiveness, cooperation, collaboration, wisdom sharing, just integrity, true speaking, trust. I think are important things that I would want to contribute towards leaving behind, and yeah, just leaving behind. I think levels of my own sort of innovation and ingenuity that can be adopted, utilized, and given out and shared amongst people.
Thank you so much for that, Sjeanne. I think my biggest takeaway is the visibility part. I think a lot of people work so hard, but they're not recognized, or they don't push themselves to be visible. And sometimes taking them along the journey, if you recognize that and pulling them up, it lessens the burden of sort of equipping, because we also a lot of the time don't have the time to equip. So dedicating the time firstly is important, but also just the small times we recognize or pull someone up out of their comfort zone and support them well enough to rise to challenges is probably quite important. I know personally I had a mentor who I used to describe as she pushes me into the deep end to drown, but she lifts me up just before anything bad happens. So thank you so much for that, Sjeanne. I
Yes.
think maybe just in closing, is there anything particular that you'd like to share with this audience in closing?
Yeah, I think I think with going forward, I think one of the biggest differentiating elements, I think, for anyone wanting to progress in the STEM space, in their own sort of corporate careers and trajectory, it really is about 100% accountability. And what I mean by that is, it can be very easy to to look for the organization, for example, to support you, and the organization can do more for me. And I think it's around taking 100% accountability for your own personal journey. Use life as an echo chamber. Use the corporate environment as an echo chamber. Use the people around you as an echo chamber. And what do I mean by this? I mean by this is like really being able to look at the space as a mirror to yourself. And whatever's coming back to you in the echo chamber, whether this can be positive or let's say slightly negative, it really doesn't matter. Is to look at this and say, I'm 100% accountable for my own development. I'm 100% accountable for my own responses to life. I'm 100% accountable for becoming visible, owning my narrative, owning my life, and driving the outcomes that I desire. And so what are the areas and the spaces then that I need to grow into, evolve into, educate myself and get information about, invest in, get mentors around, get experience around, and sort of part of the journey is other people aren't going to do it for you. The responsibility is for you to become the new version of yourself. And I started out by saying, create opportunities to meet the new you. And so what does this mean? And it talks a little bit about to what you're referring to, Lou, is like you had a mentor who pushed you into the deep end. And my experience, for example, in taking myself into these uncomfortable places, let me use Comrades as an example. That's a 90-kilometer run where I didn't know, even though I trained for it, right at the inception point of sort of signing up and having my entry submitted, immediately I faced myself. Immediately I faced my limitations. Am I going to be able to run this race? Am I going to be able to train up? What does this mean for you? I don't think I can do it. So immediately I could see my shortcomings. So the moment you engage in these courageous, audacious goals of extending yourself outside of your comfort zone, you become accountable for closing the gap in terms of your limitations. And in the process of running Comrades, I described it as I make the new me. The only place you can meet the new you is in these beyond the status quo, outside of your comfort zone spaces. And even up until on the day, I stood at the starting line and I did it 4 times. And again, it's a little bit similar to my career changes, right? I stood at the starting line of and even though I'd done it once and I did it 4 times, every single time I stood on the starting line, I was thinking to myself, can I do this? I don't know if I can finish. I've done the training, like everything now is just about on the day. And interesting enough, in Comrades, you've trained up to a 60-kilometer mark. So you've got that under your belt and you've done the training for it. So you can do 60 kilometers mentally, emotionally, physically, sort of spiritually. And then beyond the 60 kilometers, you've got no idea. You haven't been in that territory before. And I would always hit certain spaces. My first Comrades was 65 kilometers. My second Comrades was maybe at 70 kilometers, and you've got another 20 to go. And that is the place that I met the new me. In other words, this is the place where now you are out of your comfort zone. Now you are in that place where you find the resources, where you cultivate the resources in the moment, where you master resources in the moment. You master yourself in the moment, in real time, step by step, for the next 2 or 3 hours while you're on the road. You meet the new you. In other words, you meet the new emotional you. You meet the new physical and mental and spiritual you in those moments where you are outside of your comfort zone. And so with this being said, and then once you cross the finish line, you get to embody that process. So I think leaving the message going forward is really around, it's one thing to be, I don't want to say in a comfort zone to be extended, right? But to master yourself, you need to go into those uncomfortable places. Change is good. Embrace it. Embrace the opportunities of your echo chamber and what is it offering you in order to either build on as strengths or either to grow and extend into in terms of meeting the new you, because it's time. It's time that you cultivated new resources. It's time that you grew into, new emotional capacities or opened your heart more, whatever that is for you. But the important thing is then to embody those things and anchor them into a way of being. And so Comrades, for example, is a place where I became a new version of myself. So in meeting the new you become a new version of yourself. You have to become it first. You have to be it first. And then life will start to respond and echo back to you in different ways. So be encouraged, be inspired by change. Don't be afraid of it. It's invigorating for the soul. Your soul wants to expand. Your soul wants to experience new versions of yourself. And so life is going to give you plenty of opportunities to do that. It's going to be plenty of opportunities to continue to extend into the truth of who you are, what you are, and effectively who and what you are able and capable of becoming. And in that process, what you discover is every single time you step through one of these portals of change, these portals of opportunities, these portals of having to become visible, for example, or having to have a difficult conversation, every time you step into one of those portals, that is where you get to embody, embrace the next iteration of your own powerful being, your own powerful self, and bring that forward. And if you can do that for yourself, what effectively you are then able to do is you're really able to hold that space for others. You're really able to help those that you're going to journey with, those that you are either going to coach, mentor, lead. You will be able to hold that space for them, and they will know with certainty that you are capable of walking with them as they cross the river of change, for example, as they go through their next difficult iteration. So fundamentally, you end up leaving footprints for others to follow in and support them in a way better way. And so I think just embracing that journey and embracing the uncomfortable, embracing the uncertainty and becoming certain in those spaces. I think, and just one final thing, a couple of final things I'll just say on that is the only way to embrace sort of the uncertain is to cultivate a really, really deep level of conviction, of belief in yourself, a really, really deep level of trust in yourself, and a really deep level of certainty in yourself. And where you build foundations of that is in these unknown, uncharted territories. Because if you stay in your comfort zone, you stay where you are, if you look for other people to do it for you, if you look for other people to take your hand and do it for you, you don't develop those thresholds for yourself of certainty, of belief, and of truly trusting in yourself on whole new levels of groundedness. And so when I talk around anchoring things in and crossing the comrade's finish line, once I'd done that, I could ground those things into myself, and I could use them as leverage points going forward, of which I could then springboard into the next, let's say, iteration of self or next challenge for myself. So be excited by continuously innovating yourself and continuously discovering new versions of yourself. Be excited about it. It's not something to be feared. Yes, along the way, you're going to have to overcome fear, but embrace it, enjoy it, and in that, you will bring the fullness of who you are into the world more and more and more. And I think that's the exciting thing for everybody, is to see who am I actually, and what am I capable, and what light can I actually bring into the world and leave as legacies for others to follow.
That's a very, very beautiful message. Thank you, Sjeanne. I think embrace challenge with a positive mindset, and you're sorted for good growth. Thank you so much for your time, Sjeanne. It was lovely listening to you. I love that you exude positive energy and your contagious smile. So it's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Lou. So great to chat with you, and thoroughly enjoyed it.